The unstoppable Bernie Sanders and the Joe Biden comeback on this episode of Bill Whittle. Now, I'm Scott Ott, and Bill, I've been reading all kinds of speculations and prognostications and gaming out of the Democratic primaries as we approach Nevada, South Carolina, and then follow up that with the Super Tuesday states, which will include Texas and California, among others. And Bill, it's a fascinating scenario here, largely driven by the fact that there are still many candidates in the race. In fact, one of Harry Reid's former top staffers wrote a column, I believe, in the New York Times, basically saying, after all this time in the Democratic primary race, he feels like we know less now than we did when we started. So, let me just kind of bounce a couple of scenarios off you, which I think are interesting. Bernie could frankly waltz to the nomination if he can continue to win plurality wins in each one of these states or in most of these states, because there are so many candidates in the race nibbling away at the other portions of it that even if you get 25, 28%, you're the winner. And in some states, that means you get all the delegates. In some states, it means that you just get a disproportionate share of the delegates. And if you don't get 15%, you walk away with nothing in some of these places. And so all these candidates who are at, 14, 15, 16, if they don't hit 15, they get nothing. And Bernie does really well. So let's deal with Bernie first of all, because that's the nightmare for the moderate Democrats, if you want to call them that, the establishment Democrats, the elites, if you will. Their nightmare is that Bernie Sanders, they would be forced to give him the nomination of the party. What do you think of a process that picks a party leader based on essentially a quarter to a third of the votes in any given state?
I would call those people Democrats.
Well, and specifically in California, your home state, that's a really fascinating scenario there because Bernie could literally walk away from there with 415 pledged delegates if his major competitors are kept below that 15% threshold.
Right. I think one of the things that we saw in New Hampshire is that Bernie appears to be much weaker than we thought he would be. Nothing really that we're seeing is really surprising to me, but I'll tell you what is surprising to me, and that is how fast things are happening. That is absolutely astonishing.
What do you mean by that?
I didn't know if Joe Biden was going to be the nominee or not. I didn't think Joe Biden was nearly as strong as Joe Biden thought he was, but I thought it might take a month or two to figure this out. I didn't think it'd be essentially over before he even got to South Carolina.
Well, that might not be, though, Bill, because that's the other stuff I've been reading. Basically, if Joe comes in second place in Nevada and wins South Carolina, which still seems a possible outcome, he could pick up quite a few delegates, and it could become a two-man race, essentially, between him and Bernie Sanders, which is what everybody thought it would be in the beginning. But
this is a kind of a win by default kind of thing. This is like the point I'm making is that Biden's support was so astonishingly low in Iowa and New Hampshire. He underperformed so badly there that there is no Joe-mentum. There is no national, wave for Biden. The kind of thing you're talking about where Biden could basically stay in the race for a while by having this happen and that happen. Even if it does happen, it's not an indication like Biden is on his way to smooth sailing. I mean, Biden's just sort of the hollowness of his front-runner appeal. I always suspected that he wasn't going to get what people said he was going to get, but I didn't think it would happen this fast. So now people are already saying, no, there's still a chance for Biden if this, and this, and we haven't even had the third primary election yet.
Well, Biden himself is making the argument that less than 2% of the electorate, or the primary electorate, has actually cast a ballot, and some 99% of the African-American vote in the Democratic Party has not yet taken place. And so it's too early to say anything.
Well, if Joe Biden thinks he's going to get a gigantic Black American vote, then I think he's going to be in for a bit of a surprise. What was that horrific piece of pandering he put on his website? We hasn't even started fighting yet, or some monumentally condescending sort of thing. I just don't think there's anything there.
Who competes with him for that, though? Who competes with Joe Biden for the African-American vote?
I don't think anybody competes with him. I just think it basically doesn't show up. I mean, I don't see Bernie Sanders pulling a lot of African-American voters. Neither do I see Buttigieg pulling a lot. I don't see Bloomberg pulling a lot. It's like watching these characters, and it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of guys, by the way. It's like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, watching all of these horrible people just melt, you know? They're just kind of like, it's like the wax in their faces is just kind of melted. Elizabeth Warren is off the charts low now. She's already blaming, her disappearance on the media. So that's a sign that she can read the writing on the wall. And this is the thing I think that strikes me most as we continue this 6-month-long horse race. It's like this early in the game, everybody is down. And I didn't think that was possible, but I'd underestimated the Democrats yet again. Nobody seems to have any kind of enthusiasm, support, nothing. It's all just everybody's doing worse than expected. And this particular week, this person is doing less worse than we thought he might have done last week.
Well, if you look at the betting odds, and I'm looking at a Real Clear Politics survey, they actually look at, I think, 6 or 7 different betting markets. These are people who are actually wagering on the outcome of the election. I know you've followed this in the past. And then they do a Real Clear Politics average of these different markets for that. And I'm looking at a chart right now that shows, on average, Bernie Sanders at around 39.8% when it comes to who gets the nomination. Michael Bloomberg at 33.5, and the next closest one is actually Pete Buttigieg at 11 something, and then Biden at not quite 11. And if you look at the graph, you see that Bernie Sanders' line has consistently over the last 6 months gotten higher and higher and higher, and that Elizabeth Warren's has done the opposite, has gone down. Joe Biden fell off a cliff after Iowa and New Hampshire, so his line, which had been crawling upward, just plummeted. But Michael Bloomberg's has surged in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And as you well know, he's spending millions of dollars on advertising, but he also has some 2,100 employees fanned out across the country. And so he is starting to become a factor. His whole strategy is forget those early primaries where very few delegates are handed out. Let's throw everything in on the big states on Super Tuesday and become at the very least a player at a perhaps brokered convention or a divided convention.
Well, this is kind of my point. The fact that Bloomberg is suddenly looking so strong, he's not even in the race yet. No one's ever voted for Bloomberg yet, hasn't been on a ballot yet. And what does that tell you? If a guy who's not even officially in the race yet is pulling the same numbers, round numbers, as the leader, as Bernie Sanders, that's telling me what it's been telling most Americans who aren't in the Democratic Party national leadership, that this 2020 Democratic National Party's slate of candidates for the 2020 presidential election may be the worst slate in history. Nobody there is doing well. And even the front runner, who to their nightmare is Bernie Sanders, is significantly underperforming compared to where he thought he would be, compared to where he was in 2016. It's like the whole team didn't show up. And so now you're talking about a guy like Bloomberg who is coming into this thing, if not in first place, then almost certainly in second, hasn't even been in the election yet. There hasn't been a vote for him yet. And he's already in second place. What does that tell you about the strength of this field, this, what was it, 26 at one point, 22? I don't know.
It tells like me that unless the Democratic National Committee wants Bernie Sanders to be their nominee, they need to get either Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, perhaps Elizabeth Warren, or Michael Bloomberg to drop out and get behind Joe Biden, or some combination of those. Who needs to drop out, I guess, is the question.
Right. That's right. And if I were to give them advice in terms of what they would do to win, and I don't think they have much of a pathway to win, I would say rather than having Bloomberg drop out in favor of Biden, Bloomberg's not dropping out under any circumstance. He doesn't even really belong to the Democratic Party. He's just got $60 billion lying around, and he's decided he wants to be president. So there you go. I have no problem with that, by the way. So yes, you're absolutely right. These let's not call them losers. Let's just adopt the language of our friends and just say that they're minimally viable candidates. And say that these minimally viable candidates need to get out now, so that whatever votes they're pulling then tend to go to one or two of the other parties. Bernie's going to the wire. Bernie will either be the nominee or the second or the last guy who's not. I don't think there's much doubt about that.
He's a crusader. He's not a candidate.
There you go. So he's going to, I'm sure he has a problem with that word crusader as well. But in any event, given the fact that he seems to be the only person out there generating actual enthusiasm, then I think Bernie's going to be either the nominee or the last guy standing. So that leaves the big question of who else could possibly be up there. Buttigieg got a bounce, but it's not enough to give him any, personality or anything. Bloomberg, Bloomberg is just peppering the ads here in Los Angeles. Peppering's not the word, actually. Mayonnaising the ads is probably a better way to put it. The Bloomberg ads that are running here, at the end of it, and I've heard it probably 15 times now. At the end of it, he comes on and says the typical, "I'm Mike Bloomberg and I approve this message." And he can't even do that. He can't read that sentence with any kind of authority. It's honest to God, it sounds like, "I'm Mike Bloomberg and I approve this message because it's time to take our country back and save America." It's like,
but Bill, I think there's a kind
of
a weird logic to the Bloomberg candidacy. First of all, just the strength of his ability as an organizer, as a guy who knows how to run a company. I mean, clearly has put together the number one operation in the field in anywhere right now.
Right.
But there's nobody. Literally nobody on the Democratic side, either who are currently in the race or could imaginably be in the race, who can go up against Donald Trump and fight him in the arena that Donald Trump likes to fight.
Yes.
And so it makes some weird logic to say, why not just get a competent businessman who is unspectacular, practically boring, and put him up against Donald Trump and hope that enough of the middle of the country will move over and say, we could use a little bit of boring about now.
Yes, and if Bloomberg was a Republican candidate for president against Donald Trump, you'd have a real interesting kind of a fight there. But he's not. And first of all, the people who already supported Donald Trump aren't going to switch horses and get on the Bloomberg train. But the reason I said it'd be interesting if he was a Republican is Bloomberg is a billionaire. He's got $60 billion. He's 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%. The entire Democratic Party, all of it, the entire Democratic Party message for the last, 11, 12 years, at the very least since Barack Obama became president, all of it has been designed to demonize rich old white guys. And now the Democratic Party running against a billionaire is going to put up a guy who's got 30 times Donald Trump's net worth. They're going to run their own billionaire as the party of identity politics and demonizing the rich. This is why they're screwed, Scott. It's not that Bloomberg. It's not that you couldn't make a case for Bloomberg as president. It's that I don't see how you make a case for Bloomberg as president on the Democratic Party ticket. I can't. Well,
and that's another scenario that I've heard talked about too, Bill, that he doesn't get the Democratic nomination, but that he stays in the race. You just, as you were talking, he runs as an independent, but you just made me think. I could just picture Bernie Sanders going, "How did I get beaten by a guy who shouldn't even exist?"
Who should be in a re-education camp.
Billionaires should not even exist. And
not millionaires. No, millionaires are okay all of a sudden. Well, I became a millionaire recently, so it's all right to be a millionaire. But billionaires off the table.
Well, so anyway,
hold on.
Ahead.
So now you're onto something interesting. And again, not like this is my unique perspective. Other people have been talking about this too, but it is the thing we've been talking about for the last year, and I'm just proud to keep on going with it. You can't have them both. We've been saying that from the beginning. You can't have the guy who appeals to the sensible centrists, and you can't have the guy who appeals to the lunatic Marxists at the same time. That party is inherently split down the middle. And so we were talking about who does the nomination go to. But if there's any rumors whatsoever about Bloomberg becoming an independent, then the question becomes which one of these two, Bloomberg or Sanders, decides to become an independent and leave the other one with the wreckage of the Democratic Party. Or maybe they both go independent. And maybe Joe is the Democratic nominee and the Democratic Party carries 4% of the national vote. I don't know. But here's what you got. You got one establishment guy who the Democratic leadership is comfortable with, and that's Biden. Okay, how do you have a problem with a guy who's been in your party for 70 or 80 years or however long he's been in there? Okay, so Biden is old enough to have plagiarized from 7 or 8 different presidential candidates and campaigns. So he is the established Democrat, right? And then you've got Bernie Sanders and the whole left-wing crowd and the Bernie bros and the social justice warriors. You got AOC and all the rest. And they're not going to be happy if their man's not the man. And now you've got Bloomberg moving in, who's appealing to people who apparently would like to hold on to some of their money and who apparently think that there's more difficult issues than just promising everybody free stuff. And now they're suddenly being attracted to Bloomberg. So what used to be, to me, as a division between either the blue-collar Democrats or the Bernie socialists, now is looking like it's going to be a possible division between the Bernie socialists, the dyed-in-the-wool Biden old-school Democrats, and then this people who want competence and financial responsibility but don't want Donald Trump. And what used to be a two-way divide starting to look like it might be a three-way divide. Who knows? Maybe Bloomberg and Bernie both run independent. They're not running together, that much I can assure you of. But it seems more likely that one of these two guys is going to go home with the Democratic Party nomination. And I don't see any way at all that Joe Biden is coming back from this. Not after how badly his numbers have tanked, and especially after just the appalling weeks he's had, the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. All of these gaffes, the dog, pony-faced dog soldiers or whatever, and then this most appalling
lying dog-faced pony soldier,
whatever, and then this most recent thing where we ain't even a bit tired of fighting some horrific pandering stuff. Joe Biden's losing his mind, and everybody knows it. So Joe Biden's not making a comeback. I'm not saying he can't win in South Carolina. I don't think he will, but he can. But he's not coming back. He's not going to be a force. So now you've got a party with 3 heads instead of 2, all of which are mutually exclusive, and none of which I think could beat Donald Trump, even if the party were to, even if 2 of them, pick any 2 of the 3, Biden and Bloomberg and Sanders. If some miracle were to happen and all 3 of them were to develop some sense of character, let's say, or a shred of honor, or at least enough to know what it meant, and let's just say the 2 of the 3, it doesn't matter which 2, were to simply bow out for the sake of the Democratic Party, I still don't think the third person, even with the support of the other 2, has a chance to beat Donald Trump in November. And I think that's why the Dems are panicked. And I think when people get panicked, they make bigger mistakes and the panic gets worse and the wheels come off. And again, couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of guys.
I could be wrong about this, but I get the sense that the supporters of these various, at least of the leading candidates, if you want to call them that, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Warren, Sanders, Biden, I get the sense that those supporters are not fungible. In other words, they're not going to move easily their loyalties from the candidate that they're in love with now over to another.
That's exactly right. People who are coming into this thing behind Bloomberg, which seems incredible to me, but you said 30% now or something, looking forward to South Carolina. That 30% is not going to go to Bernie Sanders.
And that's a betting
Bernie
average.
Sanders becomes the nominee.
That's a betting
whatever
projection there.
Yes, right. Whatever. But that's still, it's good. It's reasonable data from the numbers. You can see a possibility of some crossflow between Bernie and Biden, more Biden supporters probably conceivably becoming reluctant Bernie supporters than Bernie supporters supporting anybody other than Bernie. So, but Bloomberg and Bernie are antithetical to each other. So there's not going to be any back and forth between those 2 branches of fungus or whatever you called them a few minutes ago. And so you're stuck, or rather I should say they're stuck. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's out at the Daytona 500 running victory laps and seems to be getting stronger every day in terms of just confidence and the blowback from this impeachment gambit is a better word actually, seems to be those chickens seem to be coming home to roost earlier than I thought they would, and in larger numbers, and I think they will do so for a longer period of time.
Well, we'll know a lot more, one suspects, after February 22nd and then after March 3rd of when the Super Tuesday results start to pour
We'll know by
in.
by South Carolina. South Carolina is going to tell us all we need to know. South Carolina is going to tell us whether...
I would challenge that, Bill. I would say if
Okay.
Joe Biden bombs in South Carolina, then that's all we need to know. If he wins South Carolina, then I think there's still an open question.
Okay. Well, after South Carolina and before Super Tuesday, we will raise this question again, and and I'll tell you with some degree of confidence that I think that that once South Carolina is over with, we're going to know.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are able to raise these questions thanks to the money that's been raised by the members at BillWhittle.com, those people who contribute on a monthly and annual basis to make it possible for these messages to go out around the country and around the world. And we are grateful.
Membership in which has been much more pleasant as of late than it had been for the 8 years prior to 2016. So yeah, let's keep this ball rolling.
We're grateful to those folks who made this possible. In addition, our buddies over the Patriot Post, America's News Digest, have also been promoting our work, and we like to promote their work as well. You'll find a link in the description below to the Patriot Post. Check that out on a daily basis. Really, they're one of the most vigorously active conservative sites I've seen, with both news and opinion and a lot of humor, and I think you're going to enjoy it. If you haven't signed up for the cruise, we are almost out of time. May 15th through the 18th, getting on the Royal Caribbean Navigator of the Seas out of the port of Miami, headed toward the Bahamas, and we are going to have a great time on board, both doing stuff like this, having these kinds of conversations in a formal way where we record them, but also informally, just over dinner and drinks, and having a lot of laughter and fun. And what a great way to have a second honeymoon with your spouse as well. So just go to BillWhittle.com to become a member. Go to BillWhittle.com and click on that big white ship and join us on the cruise. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.